For Russia, Poland has never been just another neighbor. It has been the doorway through which enemies came, the battlefield of empires, and the reminder of humiliations Moscow would rather forget. Today, that same Poland is no longer weak. It stands armed, confident, and backed by NATO. And for the Kremlin, that is the nightmare it always hoped to avoid. You are watching Erahive, where history speaks. Old scars that never heal. For Russia, Poland is not just another neighbor on the map. It is a wound in memory. A reminder of times when Moscow itself felt powerless. In the early 1600s, during Russia's time of troubles, Polish forces marched straight into Moscow. They set up camp inside the Kremlin, and for a short, humiliating moment, Russia was ruled by outsiders. That memory never left. In Russian history books, it is not just a story of defeat, it is a story of shame. The centuries that followed were no kinder. Russia grew stronger, Poland weaker, and the roles were reversed. By the late 1700s, Poland was partitioned 3 times until it disappeared from the map, swallowed by Russia, Prussia, and Austria. To Moscow, this was balance restored. To Poles, it was a stolen country, but the story didn't end there. In 1939, Stalin struck a deal with Hitler to carve Poland up yet again. Soviet troops rolled in from the east, Nazi forces from the west, and once more Poland was torn apart. After the war, the Red Army stayed. Poland was liberated, but only in name. For 4 decades, it lived under Moscow's shadow, forced into the Soviet bloc. Each of these moments left marks. For Russians, the lesson was clear. Poland is the gateway to their heartland, a place to control or be controlled through. For Poles, the lesson was different. Russia will always come, unless Poland finds a way to stand strong. And that clash of memories, humiliation for one, survival for the other, is what still shapes the relationship today. The open plains geography has never been kind to Poland, and Russia knows it well. Between the Baltic Sea in the north and the Carpathian Mountains in the south, Poland is mostly flat land. No mountains, no deserts, no great rivers to block an army's path. For centuries, it has been less a country and more a highway. Napoleon marched across it on his way to Moscow. Hitler's tanks rolled through it in days during 1939. Russian generals, even today, look at those maps and see danger. The distance from Poland's border to Moscow is short, and history has shown how quickly invaders can cover it. And then there is the Suwałki Gap, a thin strip of land between Poland and Lithuania. Barely 65 kilometers wide, it looks small, but it might be the most important piece of ground in Europe. If Russia ever moved from Belarus to link up with its Kaliningrad enclave, that gap could be closed in hours. The result? The Baltic states cut off from NATO, leaving them exposed. For Poland, this stretch of land is life or death. For NATO, it's the front line. And for Russia, it is both an opportunity and a nightmare. The open plains make invasion possible, but today they are defended like never before. This is why geography haunts Moscow. Every time Russia's leaders look west, they don't just see Poland. They see the wide road that could bring war straight to their doorstep. The day Russia lost Poland. For centuries, Russia tried to keep Poland under its influence, sometimes through partitions, sometimes through occupation, and later by forcing it into the Soviet bloc. But in 1999, everything changed. That was the year Poland joined NATO, and for Moscow, it was the day the buffer zone disappeared. Before Russia could count on having space between itself and the West, Poland, along with other Eastern European states, was a shield, weak enough for Moscow to control, strong enough to slow down anyone coming from the other side. But when Poland signed its NATO membership, the shield flipped. Now, it wasn't protecting Russia. It was protecting the West against Russia. For the Kremlin, this was a nightmare. NATO troops could be stationed on territory that Russia once considered its sphere of influence. Suddenly, Article 5, the alliance's promise that an attack on one is an attack on all, covered Poland. Any strike against Warsaw would mean facing not just Polish soldiers, but the armies of the United States, Britain, France, and the entire NATO bloc. What made it worse was Poland's determination. Unlike some Western countries, Poland didn't join NATO quietly. It shouted the warning that Russia could never be trusted, that Moscow would always look for a chance to push west again. In 1999, Russia lost more than a neighbor. It lost the comfort of distance and gained NATO sitting right on its doorstep. For Moscow, that was not just politics. It was a permanent shift in the balance of power, one it still struggles to accept, a fortress on the border. If joining NATO in 1999 was a shock for Moscow, what Poland has done since is even worse. It is no longer just a member of the alliance. It is turning itself into a fortress, the strongest land army on NATO's eastern flank. Poland's leaders decided that history would never repeat itself. No more 1939, when tanks rolled across the border and the country collapsed in weeks. This time, Poland is preparing to fight and win. Its army is already around 170,000 soldiers, and plans are underway to grow to 300,000. That would make it larger than Germany's, France's, or even Britain's. But size is only part of the story. Poland is spending more than 4% of its economy on defense, more than double NATO's minimum target, and it is buying everything modern warfare demands. From South Korea, 1,000 K-2 Black Panther tanks and hundreds of K-9 howitzers. From the United States, Abrams tanks, Apache helicopters, and the cutting-edge F-35 stealth fighters. Add HIMARS rocket systems, Patriot missile defenses, and F-A-50 jets, and you see a country building an army designed to stop Russia before it can even move. For Moscow, this is a nightmare. The old idea of Poland being weak, a country to march through on the way to Berlin or Moscow, no longer works. Instead, Russia now faces a wall of steel, a heavily armed neighbor that stands ready on its border. To Russian generals, Poland is no longer just Poland. It is NATO's shield, built with weapons Russia struggles to match, and every new delivery of tanks or jets only deepens that fear. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the Kremlin expected the West to be slow, divided, and cautious. Instead, Poland became the bridge that held everything together. For Moscow, this was another shock. From the very first days of the war, Poland opened its borders to millions of Ukrainian refugees, giving them safety while the bombs fell. But it didn't stop there. Poland also turned itself into the main supply hub for weapons, fuel, and aid flowing into Ukraine. Every Javelin missile, every HIMARS rocket system, every Leopard tank sent by the West passed through Polish roads and railways before reaching the battlefield. On top of logistics, Poland sent its own equipment too. Old Soviet-made tanks, MiG fighter jets, and home-built Krab howitzers were delivered to Kyiv. It was a way of saying, Ukraine's fight is Poland's fight. For Russia, this created a painful dilemma. It could see the lifeline running through Poland, but it could not touch it. Any attack on Polish territory would trigger NATO's collective defense, and Moscow knows that would be a war it cannot win. So instead, Russia is forced to watch as Poland strengthens Ukraine, while its own forces are worn down. In the Kremlin's eyes, Poland is no longer just a neighbor. It is NATO's warehouse, delivery service, and repair shop for Ukraine's war effort. And that makes it one of the most dangerous enemies Moscow faces today. Not because Polish troops are in Ukraine, but because without Poland, Ukraine might not survive. For years, Russia's most powerful weapon against Europe wasn't the tank or the missile. It was natural gas. The Kremlin used pipelines like political levers, raising prices or cutting supplies to pressure its neighbors. Many countries, including Germany, depended on it. But Poland saw the trap coming long before the crisis. Step by step, Warsaw worked to cut its ties to Russian energy. It built LNG terminals on the Baltic coast, able to take in gas shipped from the United States or Qatar. It signed deals with Norway to bring in fuel through new pipelines. It invested in renewables and even began planning for nuclear power. By the time Russia shut off gas to Europe in 2022, Poland had already prepared its escape. The difference was striking. While Germany scrambled to replace lost supplies and feared winter shortages, Poland carried on with little disruption. Moscow's strongest economic weapon had no grip on Warsaw. For Russia, this was more than just lost revenue. It was the loss of influence. Gas had been a chain, binding countries to Russian goodwill. With Poland breaking free, the Kremlin lost one of its favorite tools of pressure. Now, when Moscow looks west, it sees a Poland that cannot be blackmailed with fuel, cannot be bent by prices, and cannot be silenced by threats. Energy, once Russia's hidden weapon, has become useless against a neighbor that prepared for the storm. When tanks and missiles aren't enough, Russia often turns to other methods: cyberattacks, propaganda, and pressure from the shadows. Poland has been on the receiving end of all of them. In 2021, Poland faced a strange crisis on its border with Belarus, Russia's closest ally. Thousands of migrants from the Middle East were suddenly pushed toward Polish fences. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a strategy designed to create chaos and division inside Poland and across across Europe. But instead of folding, Poland doubled its patrols, built new barriers, and treated it as an attack in disguise. The plan failed. Cyberattacks came next. Russian-linked hackers targeted Polish institutions, banks, and even government websites. Disinformation campaigns tried to spread false stories online, aiming to weaken trust and stir anger. Yet each time, Poland responded quickly, exposing the lies and hardening its defenses. What frustrates Moscow most is Poland's stubbornness. This is not a country that bends easily. Its history of survival under occupation, partition, and oppression has made resilience part of its character. Every attempt to destabilize it only seems to make it more determined. For Russia, this is a dead end. The tricks that once worked on other neighbors, fear, pressure, confusion, no longer shake Poland. Instead, they reveal a country that has learned how to resist not just military invasion, but also the quieter wars fought in the shadows. For Moscow, the fear of Poland is not only about what it is today, but what it is becoming. Each year, its army grows stronger, its alliances tighter, and its role inside NATO more central. What was once a weak neighbor is now the frontline shield of the West. When Russian generals look across the border, they don't just see a country of 38 million people. They see thousands of tanks, squadrons of modern jets, missile defenses that can block the skies, and NATO troops training on Polish soil. More than that, they see a nation that has made survival a mission, one that carries the memory of invasions and refuses to be caught unprepared again. The Kremlin's old vision of Eastern Europe as a playground of influence is fading. Poland is no longer a pawn to be moved, but a fortress shaping the balance of power. Every tank delivery, every new NATO base, every speech from Warsaw chips away at Russia's hope of dominating its neighborhood. What Russia fears most is not just Poland's weapons, but its will. A will forged by centuries of hardship, a will that says never again. And that resolve, backed by the strength of NATO, is something Moscow cannot intimidate, outspend, or break. For the first time in centuries, Russia faces a Poland it cannot easily push aside. And that is why tomorrow looks darker from the Kremlin's view. History has placed Poland and Russia against each other time and time again. But today, the balance has shifted in a way the Kremlin cannot ignore. Poland is no longer the passageway for invading armies, nor the weakened state waiting for rescue. It has become NATO's eastern shield, armed, prepared, and unshakable. For Moscow, this is the nightmare, a neighbor it cannot bend, a fortress it cannot intimidate, and a front line it cannot cross without risking everything. And perhaps that is Poland's greatest victory. Not the weapons alone, but the resolve, the quiet, stubborn belief that its future will not be decided by anyone else ever again. You are watching Erahive, where history speaks. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more untold stories of history.